On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched a massive, coordinated air campaign targeting Iran's political and military leadership. The strategy was rapid decapitation. They hit over 900 targets in 12 hours. But the central objective, collapsing the regime, failed. Iran retaliated by effectively sealing the Strait of Hormuz. Roughly 20% of the world's daily oil supply was suddenly trapped. Supply chains fractured, energy prices spiked, and the global economy began hemorrhaging billions of dollars every single week. The mounting global economic crisis left the White House with few options. By June, the staggering cost of the disrupted oil markets forced Washington to seek an immediate diplomatic off-ramp. That off-ramp arrived on June 15th as the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding. Mediated by Pakistan, President Trump announced the deal as a historic breakthrough that would stabilize shipping lanes and end the conflict. To understand what was agreed to, look at this comparison. On the left is the 2015 JCPOA, which ran to 159 pages of dense annexes. On the right is the new 2026 agreement, a single sheet containing exactly 14 points. In English, the entire text runs less than 800 words. A standard job application for a fast food restaurant contains a higher word count than this entire international nuclear framework. This extreme brevity serves a specific function. It is a mechanism for taking the most difficult nuclear containment decisions and kicking them into a vague 60-day negotiation window that has yet to even begin. A side-by-side analysis of the Islamabad Memorandum against the 2015 JCPOA reveals a shift in U.S. strategic leverage. The 2015 deal operated on a strict sequence. It traded phased, heavily delayed economic relief for front-loaded, deeply verified dismantlement of Iran's nuclear infrastructure. The 2026 deal inverts that logic. It provides massive, immediate economic concessions to Tehran in exchange for a temporary, unverified freeze on a nuclear program that is far more advanced today than it was a decade ago. To see exactly how this leverage was traded, we can measure the new memorandum against the 2015 baseline using three specific metrics: physical infrastructure constraints, IAEA oversight, and economic leverage. Examining these points reveals the extent to which the United States moved away from its core nuclear security objectives in order to end the shooting. We start with the first metric, the hard physical limitations placed on the Iranian nuclear program. This Obama White House infographic highlights the 2015 JCPOA's strict physical requirements. Notice the top green checkmarks. Iran must reduce its enriched uranium stockpile by 98%. Further down, the agreement required dismantling 2/3 of installed centrifuges, reducing the operational count to 6,000 older models. Now, compare those hard numerical caps to how the 2026 Islamabad Memorandum handles that same physical infrastructure. The 2026 text abandons these limits completely. It demands zero centrifuge reductions and establishes absolutely no caps on the size or enrichment level of uranium stockpiles. Instead, the document addresses the nuclear issue primarily in point 9, which asks Iran to maintain the current status quo of its nuclear program. This immediately creates a status quo trap. Months before the war began, the International Atomic Energy Agency reported that Iran was already restricting access to key sites. Without verified stockpile limits or centrifuge dismantlement, Iran's actual breakout timeline to produce enough fissile material for a weapon remains at its current advanced level. That brings us to the second metric, international verification and oversight mechanisms. The 2015 JCPOA established the most intrusive verification regime in history. It mandated 24/7 continuous monitoring at primary nuclear sites like Natanz and Fordo, facilities massive enough to house these towering cascades of silver centrifuges. It also required a 25-year continuous tracking mandate across the entire supply chain. Inspectors monitored materials from the moment uranium left the mines through to the centrifuge manufacturing and assembly plants. If the IAEA suspected covert activity, the JCPOA enforced a strict 24-day dispute timeline, ensuring international inspectors could force access to suspicious military sites. The 2026 memorandum strips away every single one of those tools. The text completely fails to secure any mechanisms for IAEA access inside the country. In the entire 800-word document, there is no mention of snap inspections, no supply chain tracking, and no dispute resolution timelines. the international inspection apparatus remains locked out. Without inspectors on the ground, the 2026 deal relies exclusively on Iran's self-reported verbal pledge that they will not build a nuclear weapon. From a historical perspective, this is the exact same unverified pledge the Islamic Republic has been making for 50 years. Without independent verification, the agreement functions as an unsupervised honor system granted to a hostile state. The third and final metric is the timeline of economic relief and leverage. Under the 2015 JCPOA, compliance strictly preceded capital. The United States withheld all sanctions release until the IAEA officially verified that Iran had physically dismantled its nuclear infrastructure. This timeline illustrates the 2026 agreement front-loading massive economic concessions. Point 12 mandates a $300 billion reconstruction fund. Point 11 unfreezes over $100 billion in foreign assets, creating another massive capital spike. Furthermore, Point 10 requires the U.S. Treasury to immediately issue waivers for Iranian crude oil exports and banking transactions, allowing vessels like this tanker to resume unrestricted petroleum trade. Capital and market access flow to Iran immediately under this timeline, weeks before diplomats sit down to negotiate the actual details of a final nuclear deal. The memorandum places zero restrictions, oversight mechanisms, or transparency requirements on how Iran can spend this sudden financial windfall. By surrendering nearly $400 billion in economic leverage up front just to achieve a temporary ceasefire, Washington has removed the primary incentive for Iran to agree to actual nuclear constraints later. To understand how the United States arrived at this highly asymmetric position, we have to look at the military miscalculation that started the war. Earlier in the year, Washington successfully executed a highly centralized decapitation strike in Venezuela, removing the leadership within hours. They assumed the exact same tactic would collapse the government in Tehran. But Iran operates on the Mosaic doctrine. They deliberately decentralized their military command structure. When a central node goes dark from an airstrike, the surrounding network is designed to survive, immediately eliminating and sustaining command and control. Because the state structure survived the initial bombing campaign, Iran retained the capacity to execute its ultimate threat, closing the Strait of Hormuz and choking off a fifth of the world's daily oil traffic. By weaponizing the global oil supply, Iran created an economic hostage situation. The resulting financial shockwaves left an increasingly desperate Washington with no choice but to accept the minimal Islamabad framework. Deploying military force without accurately understanding an adversary's structural resilience leads directly to significant diplomatic concessions at the negotiating table. The geopolitical fallout of this miscalculation extends far beyond the nuclear question. Point 1 of the agreement mandates an immediate and permanent end to hostilities on all fronts, including Lebanon. This leaves Israel in a diplomatically isolated position. Despite months of intensive combat, Jerusalem achieved zero of its war aims regarding the dismantlement of Iran's enrichment infrastructure or its regional proxy networks. By explicitly agreeing to a ceasefire in Lebanon on Israel's behalf, the United States has driven a potentially permanent wedge between Washington and its closest Middle Eastern ally. The sheer costs of this operation are stark: 4 months of combat, billions of dollars in expended ordnance, 13 American lives lost, and an unprecedented disruption to global trade. The ultimate result was the United States paying a $400 billion premium to an emboldened, hardline Iranian regime while effectively ignoring the nuclear question. In exchange for a temporary ceasefire, the United States traded away its strategic leverage and verified nuclear oversight,